minute or two as you're walking in, because I'm saying, no, you were the real deal. You were there. Tell me about that
Yeah.
in bank, because you're talking about jihadists that they wouldn't surrender for anything. Go ahead.
I fully expected to see dead bodies. What I didn't expect to see was clothing, shoes, weapons, as if people were ripped out of their very clothes and shoes, strewn all over the ground. The detonator, all of this stuff was there. You know, I want to tell you, it was almost like walking into, it was like a ghost town. I don't know any other way to say it. And these guys were crying. They were speaking nonstop. Our interpreter was trying to, to keep up with them. But it was a very crazy situation. So my thoughts and my beliefs on that, seeing that, goes back to that prayer that I had underneath the sabers. And I got to tell you that my driver, Brian Noble, and I've said this before, is one of the bravest soldiers I've ever had the honor of working with in my life. I can know of 3 times that I can count on my hand that man has saved my life. I know. I was there. But he told me, he says, under the sabers, as we've talked about this, he said, I prayed too. Now, this was a guy that didn't pray much. He struggled with faith and believing and not believing. Totally transitioned that man. So it didn't just affect me. It affected a lot of people. And there are people right now in Ohio and West Virginia and Tennessee, or in different places, that are thinking about this day in a different way, because they're looking at Easter and they're thinking about it. And those that saw all these things that happened, but more importantly, that crew of mine that went through every single bit of that, I believe that souls were saved for Jesus Christ because of all of that. And if me experiencing that chaos, if me experiencing everything that brought you to that point, because if ever there was a sinner in the world, it was me, buddy. I, I've done a lot of bad things in my life that I've spoke about, haven't spoke about, killed, not murdered, but killed human beings and talked about it very matter of factly. And people think, well, must not bother you. Must be a monster. And I've been called those things, a monster. And to tell this story, you hear people, they'll say, well, you're a liar. Okay, you don't have to believe me, but I'm here. And there are reasons why I put things in museums. It's just like when Dwight Eisenhower wanted all the Germans and all the people to go through the concentration camps, because he knew that somewhere in the future that someone would come up and say, well, this didn't happen. There was no Holocaust. And sure enough, he was right. But for many years, those that lived and actually physically seen it and shared that information and videotaped it and filmed it and took pictures of it, yeah, it really happened. And there are things that happen that I believe are designed to happen for the purpose of showing the power and the greatness of God. So, do I think it was aliens from outer space? No, I think it was the hand of God, just like you said, Greg. I think it was the same thing that stopped bullets that were whizzing past my face. Literally, one ricocheted, off of the side of your helmet. And I have seen guys that had bullets that went through their rifle, bullets that went through, you know, the strap that hung off their rifle. Had one guy that had a first aid kit, combat lifesaver first aid kit strung around his side, and we were looking at it later, and a bullet had went through the strap and never touched him. Now, how does that happen? Well, in so many instances, how does that happen? It's because God was there with us and because he protected us. That's my message to people. And because we followed, we obeyed. It's just like David, when he went down to face Goliath, he went down listening and following what God said, but he still had to be good with that slingshot. He still had to be good with his aim. So you still have to be proficient in your duties, in your things that you need to do, whatever your job is. But you have to take the time to share these messages of hope and faith and things that occurred in your life that you just can't explain. A non-believer can't explain it, but a believer can explain it very easily. And that's what I think occurred that day. And more so than anything, the explanation of the lights and the orbs. I believe that's true. They saw every bit of that. And I believe, and I know that's something, tell me what purpose that terrorist would have with laying out weapons and strewing them out in a line, going through all the work of digging in multiple artillery shells, wiring them up, hiding it, through and under. The wire went from the other side of the road into an underpass, underneath the road, only to surrender to a group of people that are coming back from a mission. I've got 2 gun trucks at that point, our truck and another. Tell me what the purpose would be in just surrendering like that. Unless you were truly telling what had happened to you. There would be no purpose in it. They could have surrendered. They could have came, if they were looking for food, a way to escape Iraq, they could have done that very easily. They could have worked with the U.S. forces, and that would have been made possible. But they would have never went through all of that trouble to make that story up if it had not been for something greater than what we can explain. And look, sometimes we just accept it as that's, it's God's will. God willed us to survive. We survived. But now God didn't just will us and keep us alive to just sit on this story or to allow people to kill that story by not elevating it to the levels it needs to be. This is a small part. The big part is yet to come when you get that platform to be able to tell it to the world. This is what happened. And I think that in a lot of ways that there are people that hear this and they say, it's hard to explain, but there's videos that show it. Most, except for this, I wish there was a video that existed about the orbs, but there's definitely videos of what happened at the Battle of Biop. There's definitely videos and pictures from those ambushes. And there's definitely maps and diagrams and literally hundreds of stories that are out there. There's 2 documentaries that were made by the Army. One is this one right here. It's called The Road War. Go look it up. It's on YouTube. Operation Iraqi Freedom, The Road War. It goes into a lot of things about that weekend. But it doesn't really focus on the fact that that was also Easter Sunday. And I think that that's the purpose that God has with reviving this story and probably bringing you both into my life, is because
Bingo.
here's an opportunity to focus on what really mattered about that. The people that found salvation, and how many people could potentially go to Christ by hearing and seeing and elevating that story. It could be thousands, it could be hundreds, it could be millions. But if just one escapes, or 2, like these 2 guys, then what a great thing that is. Glory be to God. To him goes the glory.